Have you ever treated your own personal prayers like a vending machine or something like you say the right words or you drop the right coin, and out pops your salvation or your blessing? Or, you act like if I do the right things, if I say the right things, then I'll be right with God. Um, and what I want to argue this evening is that we oftentimes, a lot of us will fall into this way of thinking, and it really amounts to a kind of sorcery in a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways in which the practice of Christianity among a lot of us, among a lot of modern people, and in modern Christianity in general, oftentimes amounts to what is really sorcery. Um, and I know that might seem like a bold claim, but let's explore that tonight. So, these things, they're the root of a lot of problems in our personal lives, a lot of problems in our communities, a lot of problems in our world today. So we're going to unpack that all tonight. For a lot of people, a lot of times we treat faith as something like a checklist. A classic example of this is something like the sinner's prayer. If we say this right prayer, if we say the right words, um, then we'll have salvation. We'll be accepted as a Christian. It's like if I have this formulaic approach to Christianity where I accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and I do this and I do that, then I am a Christian and I am saved. And we add on top of that doctrines where we say if we've done this, we've gone through the checklists, then we have assurance of salvation. And again, what I'm dropping tonight in this video is the idea that that really amounts to a kind of sorcery. That it's a system that's designed to make us feel like we are certain, to feel like we are safe, and to, in a way, put us in control of our own faith, of our own destiny, of our own lives. And this is really kind of counter to genuine Christian humility, genuine Christian faith, something designed to make us feel safe, and so on. But it leaves us in control and takes the control away from God. So when we reduce the mystery of the living mystery of Christ to things essentially like spells, we kind of say these things, we do these things, we go through the motions, we live our lives in such a way to get certain and predictable results. So it becomes about having the right doctrines, having the right beliefs, doing the right things. This isn't only a criticism of Protestantism, though it is that in a sense, but it's also a danger that Orthodox Christians can fall into. And it's just a common problem a lot of us run into. So really, what I'm not trying to do tonight is to cast this kind of straw man of Protestantism and to present this is what Protestantism or this is what Anabaptism is, or evangelical Christianity, and so on. Although I will point at these groups and say they have a tendency to fall into this particular sort of error, perhaps more than anybody else does. But it is a danger that everybody can fall into in their own personal life. So rather than being like a polemical attack on Protestantism as such, I guess this is really more of a personal reflection for me, a personal reflection for all of us. And this all arises out of our desire for some semblance of control, something that we can understand again. So I want to look at how this kind of plays out in our ideas of conversions, our ideas of being faithful Christians, our ideas of things like prayer, our approach to sin. I think this also sneaks into like charismatic type of Christianity as well in a particular sort of way. But then what I really want to point out beyond that is how this is a problem that really characterizes a lot of modern Christianity, but also the modern world in general has kind of results from an extension of a problem that occurs first in the church. So like I mentioned earlier, we have things like the sinner's prayer. And again, I'm not like trying to straw man Protestantism or evangelicalism and say this is what these people teach, this is what they believe. Rather, I'm pointing to how it often works out in our own personal lives. So it's something like we have a prayer like the sinner's prayer that we recite. We consent to these certain facts about the atonement, about the work of Christ. We assent to these certain doctrines and theologies. And we might even treat the creed like this, that if we recite the creed, then we're in the right club, we're the right kind of Christians. Or if I'm an Orthodox Christian, I'm baptized, chrismated in Orthodox Christianity, I partake in the sacraments, and I do all the right things, then I can kind of check that box and I have my salvation taken care of. And all of those are wrong ways of thinking that, again, I would say, like, amounts to a kind of sorcery. So we can treat doctrines as formulas, like agree to these 5 points, things like sola fide, sola scriptura, sola gratia, the 5 solas. And each group has their own certain doctrine. You have to believe these doctrines, you have to consent to these things, you have to agree with what we teach and what we say, and then you're in the right club and you're assured of your salvation. These things are, I guess, they're a temptation to make us feel like we have some kind of power and control over our own destiny. And I think there's like this kind of irony, this cruel kind of irony to it, really, that those who proclaim things like assurance of salvation and things like sola fide, we're saved by faith alone and not by works, end up falling into this way of thinking and this way of living, wherein they have to do the right things. They have to constantly exert this kind of discipline over themselves and over their bodies in order to be, like, in order to not fall into sin. That's what I would think of as an Orthodox Christian in terms of salvation. And we can kind of reduce faith to things like this, where faith is something, if I have enough faith, if I just believe hard enough, or if I just expel all doubt from my mind, then this is the sort of discipline that I have to do in order to be saved, because allowing these kinds of things is kind of like an inverse spell in the opposite direction that causes me to lose my salvation or to move further away from God, and so on. So this is really reflected in our ideas of sin. We think of sin as bad deeds, and we kind of have this really reductive idea of sin in that way. Sin is a list of bad things that you do. I do this, I do this, I do this. I think bad thoughts, I do bad things. Maybe I skip out on church and things like this. That this is like, I don't know, kind of sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. I like to see that my my comments section is a little bit unhinged this evening, but that's fun. Go ahead and keep that up. So anyway, we have these ideas about sin in this very sort of legalistic sense, and as a result, we think not sinning. And as I said already, this kind of irony, not sinning becomes like this exercise of the will of the mind over the body. We have to this will go as far as like, we'll have a bunch of apps and checklists and stuff to avoid bad habits. We have all of this teaching against things like lust, which obviously is sin, but the way we approach it is in like this very I don't know, this sense in which it is the exercise of the body, the exercise of the will, that will somehow save us. And it sort of is, again, like this sorcery that we are going to eventually, if we try hard enough, we're going to kind of like find the magic formula that will preserve us from sin, and will preserve us from error. And that's kind of like what we're striving for, what we're yearning for, is something where we're in control. And again, like the loudest voices that are yelling against the works salvation, so-called works salvation, supposed works salvation, that are at play in Orthodoxy. Which, again, I watched the recent video I did responding to needgod.net, where I kind of refute that idea that Orthodoxy is teaching works salvation. But anyway, these people that are really decrying this the loudest are the ones that are actually guilty of this the most, that practically saving themselves through their strength of will, so through their grit. This is something that was especially true in my my Mennonite background, my Anabaptist roots, where it's like by the exercise of all of these external disciplines that we will save ourselves, which is not, it's not like those play no part at all in our, I don't know, in our Christian life, in our Christian walk. But there really winds up being this sense in which if we, if we are the best at following all the rules, again, this is like a sort of sorcery where we're giving ourselves power over our own fate and our own destiny. So sin is again this enemy that is to be defeated, which it is, but Christ is the one who defeats it. But what is missing from this is this, I don't know, this idea of the church and of the Christian faith as healing. Because again, sin is a sickness of the soul. It's not merely a collection of bad deeds that you do. Rather, these bad deeds are the consequence of that sin. This is taught like pretty clearly in the Christian faith. I would argue this is what the scripture actually teaches. We have things like the word that is used for sin, amartia, in Greek, which means missing the mark. It is kind of like this soul sickness, and that's why Christ is portrayed as a physician. And repentance, the sacraments of the church, and all these things that we do, rather than being like this magic spell that wins us, I don't know, like earns our salvation or wins the approval of God. It's medicine for the soul. And it's certainly true that even Orthodox Christians can treat these things as this kind of sorcery, that we go through the motions, we do these things, we can win our salvation. And so what I'm talking about tonight, again, is not this idea that Protestants are all wrong and Orthodox are all right. Rather, it's just pointing at this broader concept that we all can fall into, whether we are Protestant, Anabaptist, Orthodox, Catholic, whatever it might be, of wanting to have, like, I don't know, this craving for control, reduction of everything to a formula or to a set of things that we can do. We can perform in the right way. We can jump through the right hoops. We can, do all the things, say all the things, attend the liturgies, attend church, do the prayers, so on and so on. And this is, this is like somehow giving us some kind of magic power. This is some magic formula that we've unlocked. And again, I'm saying that is akin to sorcery. It's kind of the same. It's really the same sort of root error that sorcery is, in which it is this kind of unnatural means by which we are seeking to exercise control over our own lives and control over the world, and even control over the divine, control over the spiritual realm. And in contrast to that, what we need as Christians is humility. And humility is the true way, is the correct way. You could say humility is the only way out. And kind of the extreme version that you see of this in a lot of ways actually is the modern world, because the modern world is one in which we've really tried to construct a world in which we have complete and total control of our own destiny. We really have constructed this value of, I guess you could say, of self-determination, wherein we are the masters of our own lives, we're the masters of our own world. And technology, it's not that technology is inherently evil. I'm not, contrary to one of the questions asked in the group chat, I'm not Amish. And that, it's not any, and even the Amish aren't like all technology is evil. But so oftentimes technology in our modern world can be a means by which we are trying to be masters of our own faith. We're trying to be masters of our world, masters of the universe, masters over creation, and kind of remove God from the equation, remove humility from the equation. We would replace spirituality with technology, with technocracy even. And this is kind of like the downfall of the modern world, is which we are, I don't know, we're kind of continually repeating the sin of Adam, and wanting to be like gods in the wrong sense of way, wrong sort of way. And instead of being like God himself and being like Christ, we end up being more like demons, because it really is, in the end of the day, their teachings that we are listening to, their whisperings in our minds, their yelling in our ears that we are listening to. And so we are craving sort of things that they want us to crave, dominion, domination, control, instead of the things that God has set out for us. So we're not submitting ourselves to truth and to beauty, but rather we are, we're suppressing these things, grinding them under the heel, and creating this world in which we are masters of of creation, masters over our own lives. And so we've, kind of removed ourselves from the heavenly hierarchy. Um, a lot of this is because humility is actually quite terrifying, because what humility means, like humility is risky, humility is dangerous, because God might not want for us what we want for ourselves. And what God does do for us and do in our lives when we give him that control, or when we let go of that kind of control, um, it's not going to be comfortable for us. It's not what we think we want for ourselves. And engaging in spiritual warfare, again, is dangerous and is often painful. And the mystery of God, it's something that we can't control. It's something that we can't understand. And these are all things that we, as inherently prideful beings, as humans, we really hate all of these things. So instead, we replace them. We replace the truth. We replace humility. We replace God. We replace genuine Christianity with sorcery. Again, these predictable approaches to Christianity, these formulaic approaches to Christianity, in which we don't have to be vulnerable. We don't have to let go. We don't have to. We don't have to do any of these things, because we can be in control. We can predict, uh, and we don't there doesn't have to be anything that is unknown. We can delude ourselves, we can trick ourselves into thinking that we have all the answers, we have everything figured out, we have everything sorted out. And it is kind of like Dostoevsky portrays in his little short story of the Grand Inquisitor, that's found in the Brothers Karamazov, that we've created this religion for ourselves in which we no longer need Christ. There's not really a place for him anymore in our religious system. The idea of Christ might be present there, but Christ himself, we don't need that any longer. Um, but in contrast to that, the problem with that really is that, I guess, the enemy that we are facing is bigger than something that we're going to be able to control. And when we create these safe systems, and that we have tried to control by our, what I'm calling sorcery, then really we wind up creating a system that is in fact ruled by the demons. When there is no longer a humility in that, then we can be assured that the demon of pride is in control, and that this in turn opens the door for all sorts of other demons. The demons of lust, the demons of, I don't know, just list off all of these demons. And I don't know. I think this is a big part of the reason why so much of modern Christianity is stuck fighting all of these demons. It's because their system is inherently controlled by demons. That's not to say that we as Orthodox Christians, or we who aren't guilty of this particular error, do not I don't know do not fight demons, because obviously we do. The Christian life is one of spiritual warfare. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, any of us can fall into this error, and we're in danger of this, where we I don't know we reduce our faith, we reduce our lives to this kind of sorcery. We have ideas like from Saint Isaac, who says that humility slays the demons, but pride invites them. And Saint Seraphim says that peace through humility will save thousands. These are paraphrases, but I don't know. It's just, I gotta, like, trying to point out that we have this perpetual problem. And again, like, I see comments here talking about things like, we see things like, we see things like this creeping into all of our lives. Like, this isn't like a Protestant versus Orthodox video as such. And kind of what I'm really wanting to get around to in this is that, like, this ultimate idea that we have, this ultimate problem, I should say, that we have in the world today. Again, I mentioned this already, but the modern world is essentially one of sorcery. This might be a hard concept for some to understand at first. I don't know. I don't think it's really that difficult of a concept. But there's not really a difference between magic and technology, because they both ultimately serve the same goal, which is power and control. And we've in the modern world kind of settled on technology because it is the most it is done the best at giving us what we think that we want, which is again power and control. There's a serious problem with this, and I think I've laid that out already. I don't have to go through that and through that entire argument all over again. But we do see these things like like rationalism, the rise of rationalism, which is that we can know everything, we can explain everything, we can create this system in which all of the answers are laid out. So we can reduce everything to formulas, and if we can reduce everything to formulas, then we can predict everything. We can control everything. We can see what's coming. We can know. We can be in control. And again, there's no need any longer for God. There's no need for humility. There's no need for submission to the hierarchy, like to God's hierarchy. We've conquered the chaos of life with reason, and reason has triumphed over disorder. And this is like the ultimate triumph of the self, the ultimate triumph of humanism, in which we can, I don't know, create this world in which we are again and firmly in control. But you see kind of the madness of this system in which we find ourselves in the age where everybody is faced with tremendous mental, I don't know, mental unwellness. I don't know quite how else to say this. Mental health, mental well-being has become a particular fixation of our time today, and it's partially because I guess these sort of spells, the sort of sorcery that we've bought into doesn't actually work. And like that's the primary reason why we're arguing against it. Like if it did actually work, that'd be one thing, but it doesn't. This technological sorcery that we've bought into, this rationalistic world, this modern, this whole modern world that we've constructed, it doesn't actually give you any of the things that it promises you. And so we're, I don't know, in a lot of ways, we're continuing down this road. If like, hey, well, if we just keep pressing further, if we keep advancing technology, if we keep advancing science, if we keep going further and further down this road, then eventually we'll have the right answers. But I don't know, we can't step outside of the project that to look at it and to see that it's never given us any of the things that it's actually promised, and it's constantly tricking us, it's constantly fooling us and deluding us, but also constantly making us more and more unwell, more and more desperate, more and more, I don't know, just like increased anxiety, increased mental unwellness. And so this is, I don't know, this is just a way in which we look at this and we see that this is one way in which this line of thinking has worked itself out in the modern world, and it's just all consequential of the sort of disease that we've all kind of succumbed to in certain ways, in which we try to find ways in which we can be in control of our own destiny. And kind of the solution to this, the antidote to this is actually submission to Christ, submission to Christ's church, to the hierarchy, to true faith, being able to let go, being willing to let go, releasing this desire for control, this desire for predictability, for understanding. We don't actually have to have the answers to everything. We don't actually have to know everything. We don't need to understand everything. And once we can accept that, we can accept we don't actually need to be in control of everything. We don't have to account for all the variables. We don't have to have like this perfectly constructed plan that probably wasn't going to work out anyway. Instead, what we need is faith in God. What we need is humility and submission to His church. We need all of these things, and ultimately, what we need are the things that actually offer us, like actually give us the things that all of these things that I'm labeling as sorcery pretend to give us. And the only thing ultimately that can give us that is Christ Himself in His church. So we need to understand Christianity not as this kind of sorcery in which if I do the right things, then I am assured of my salvation. And we can, let me regather that thought. If I can do all these things, then I can be assured of my salvation. And, that's it. That's the answer. And this will start, then taking care of all of my personal problems. But instead, we need to understand Christianity. We need to understand the Christian faith as one of healing, as one of, like this is the balm for our souls, like salvation, not in terms of like a box that you check, but rather in terms of this idea again of grace and healing for our souls. Sin again as a sickness, and not simply as like a list of bad things that we do. Like that's not saying that bad things that we do are not sinful. It's just, that's not the primary issue. And this is like the true freedom that we have in Christ. It's freedom from this, I don't know, this vicious cycle that we've thrown ourselves into. I hope I have, I don't know, I hope I've constructed at least a halfway coherent argument. So that's kind of my presentation. Now I'll give the time for some of your comments and your questions that you have. Before I go any further, though, I'd like to again remind everybody of our sponsor, which is me, Gregorius Iconography. I am an iconographer in the Orthodox Church. That's how I make my living. You can see a few examples of my work up here on the screen. I hope that you would consider checking out the link in the description to my iconography website, my business. Please consider supporting me, supporting the Sacred Life, supporting what we're doing by checking that out. I'm looking at your comments here. Sorry if I seem a little bit distracted. I'm trying to sort through all these things. Pretty active comment section today. So I'm going to look through and first acknowledge some of your shout outs here. Again, you can if you enjoyed this content. I've been gone for the last week, so I'm kind of out of the swing. Sorry if this is a little bit disorganized tonight. Trying to get back in the swing of my my nightly live streams after being on vacation for a week. So first of all, I'll put this this comment up where Soldier of the Christ 777 says there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church, and I agree with that. There is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church, outside of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, which is the Orthodox Church. However, I think that requires some explanation, which is a little bit beyond the topic of this video tonight. And the other question we have in here is God's design perfect? Yes, God's design is perfect. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now, because there's quite a lot that goes in with that. That doesn't mean that man is incapable of falling from that, but that's also, but yeah, anyway, there's a lot to unpack there that I'm not really prepared to unpack. We have a comment here. It says Leviticus 2 seems to disagree with the assertion. Look at Leviticus 4:2. Seems to disagree with your assertion that sins are not discrete actions, but a condition of the soul. Let me look that up real quick, just so I have the verse. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm not going to read the verse here, but it's not that discrete actions. It's not that actions are not sinful and that they are not sins. I think there's maybe you misunderstood the kind of the scope of what I was saying. Soldier of the Christ again. You've dropped a few comments. I appreciate your comments. You say the ultimate problem is modernity, and I agree. The problem is modernity. Okay, I'm glad this kind of comment came in here where Vegas in December, he says that indoor plumbing and vaccines are definitely the ultimate problem. And I'm glad this kind of comment came in here because this is a perfect example of the sort of thing that I am not talking about. Again, like I'm not I'm not making the point that all technology is evil and that things like indoor plumbing and vaccines, oh, these things are evil, these things are the devil. Um, I'm more talking about the relationship that we as individuals in society can sometimes have to technology, to science, to these things, which is putting them out of their proper place and putting more faith in them than is proper. Um, and when we give into these things in such a way that we want to have I don't know, we want to have like ultimate control over our world, ultimate control over our destiny in a way that we really can't, in a way in which we sort of um how should I say this, we sort of we've allowed ourselves to be fooled into thinking that we actually have that kind of control, and we see that so often in people's lives that really doesn't work out well for them. And again, another comment from the same commentary says we don't need to have all the answers. And then, guys, I have the answers. It's God. It's just a demonstration again of the sort of misunderstanding of the scope of what I'm saying that I kind of expected. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that those comments are there just to give me the opportunity to explain that I think you're misunderstanding um, exactly what it is that I'm talking about, and you're applying it to something that I am not fundamentally talking about. Um, so here's another comment from Robert Lowther. I hope I'm saying that right. He says technology promises connection and access to information, and today we are more connected and to have more access to information than ever before. Your assertions just don't stand under basic scrutiny. So again, this false. So for one thing, this is a false equivalency. This is a fallacy to point out examples of where technology has promised us things, and to say that refutes the claim that technology hasn't given us things that it's promised. So this is like fundamentally the wrong sort of thing. This is not again within the scope of what I'm saying. Um, and also like I think you're misunderstanding and saying that I'm saying like all technology is bad and evil. And maybe you're not quite understanding that I'm referring to like the way in which we relate to technologies and the way in which we I don't know that we I don't know the extent to which we I don't know we go into these things. Um, and Vegas in December also left a comment here when I said I hope I've made sense, and he says, "Don't worry, you haven't." That is, I'm thank you for that confirmation. I'm glad to know that I, in fact, do not make any sense and have not put together a coherent presentation. Um, so his tube asked the question. So faith in Jesus isn't enough for salvation. Um, what? Like, what does that have to do with anything that I said here? Again, I would just refer to you to watch my video where I address this particular claim. When I see comments like this, it just to me demonstrates a failure to understand. I don't know the scope of what we're talking about. Um, Continue to look through. Sorry, there's a lot of comments here. I appreciate the comments, by the way. Thanks to everybody who's leaving comments, even if they're not relevant. If you're having conversations, that's great. I appreciate that. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. Um, we have a question here from Mike Duck. Um, What advice would you give to a Mennonite inquiring into Orthodoxy? A question I had was about apostolic succession. Is there documentation showing the succession, for example, for your bishop? So first of all, there's a couple questions there. Let's start with the first question. What advice would you give to a Mennonite inquiring into Orthodoxy? Um, the first kind of layer of advice I would give would be to be willing to, I don't know, be willing to ask difficult questions of I both of the orthodox position, but also of your own beliefs. Like don't ever I don't know, don't ever take your own ideas, your own doctrines, your own teachings, what you've been raised to believe. Don't ever take those things for granted. And that applies for Orthodox Christians as well, because like I believe that, like that applies for everybody. I believe that the truth is never afraid of being questioned. The truth is never in danger when it's faced with difficult questions. And so we should never find ourselves in a position where we're not willing to ask the hard questions. So that's like, I don't know, that's my first layer of advice. Again, is don't I don't know, my first piece of advice I should say is don't be afraid to ask difficult questions, and don't take your own beliefs for granted. Um, I think that's the biggest one I have. Just try to keep an open mind, and then I would also say, like, I would encourage everybody read the early sources, um, but like be very very cautious that you're not reading your own presuppositions into them. You're not reading what you think they're saying into them. Just try to allow them to speak themselves, and do the same thing with the Bible, with the Scripture. Continue, obviously, read your Bible every day, but read it as if it is something new, and God will be able to speak to us if we approach Him with that kind of humility. And then you're asking about apostolic succession. First of all, the question: is there documentation? No, there's not. Um, at least past a certain point, because again, we have to remember the first 3 centuries of Christianity were pretty difficult. There's a lot of persecution. Even the written sources that we have an extreme minority of what was actually written during the first 3 centuries. I think it's less than 10% of sources known to have existed, through references and other documents or whatever it might be, still exist today. Um, and yeah, I guess that's all you had really asked. I guess anything else I would say, I'd be assuming you're asking something. Um, we have done some videos on apostolic succession, so maybe you could check that out. I'll probably do some more on that in the future as well. Um, Sorry, I'm having to sort through the comments here and see what are actually questions to me and what are actually comments. Within the conversation in the comments section. Um, and even that, if it's something I want to respond to. I don't know. There's a lot of conversation about Mary going on here, which is not really the scope of this video, but that's fine. You guys go ahead and have that conversation. If there's any more questions, I'll give a little more time here for questions and answers. Hopefully, I've answered your questions at least somewhat satisfactorily. Again, if you're not a channel member, please consider joining as a channel member. We do have things like super chats available as well. If you'd like to support the Sacred Life, check out the links in the description as well. I already mentioned my iconography business. That's my day job. That's my full-time job. That doing iconography on my own, and also working as an apprentice for another iconographer. So please consider purchasing some hand painted icons or icon prints from me. I could use the work. Could That would definitely be helpful. You can also support us on Patreon. That supports the animation project that we're working on, which is to do animated stories of the lives of the saints, which again is a project I'm doing with the blessing of my priest. And I am working on the animation. Again, I was off on vacation for a week, so I haven't been working on it over the past week. But we do have this stuff going. So those are all ways that you can support us. And again, leave your comments. We love to hear your comments. If you have things like you'd like to hear me talk about in these live streams, you'd like to hear us talk about in our group discussions, any of those things, just drop your comments. We appreciate your feedback. We appreciate all of you that have been watching. So Robert Lowther has the question here. He says, a lot of your answers have been you misunderstood or that's not the point. Could you briefly reiterate your point? Because I think we missed it. Well, so the point really is that, I don't know, just to put it in brief, the summary of my point is that we want things that allow us to be completely in control of our own lives, and we run after things that give us this kind of promise of control. So like the sort of things that I was pointing at, like, so for example with technology, where you I don't remember if that was you or somebody else who pointed out that here's a promise that technology made and it delivered on. It's like, oh yes, but that's not the promise that I was talking about, because the promise was that technology has promised to put us in control. And I would say it's failed to deliver that promise, and in fact, it has enslaved us more often than not. So that's really what I'm talking about. Is we have things, we have a like an innate pridefulness as humans, where we want to be in control and we want to have all of the answers. We want to explain everything. We want to know everything. We want this kind of power, and we run after these things that offer us this sort of power. And I'm kind of using the term sorcery as a means of kind of capturing all of these things, because really that's what sorcery is. Sorcery is like something that gives us an unnatural sort of power over our lives or over others or over the world around us. Technology is one example of that in the modern age. Again, I'm not saying that all technology is bad and that we shouldn't have technology, that we shouldn't advance. I'm not saying that we should throw all those things away and live like people lived 1,000 years ago. That's definitely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying instead is that we shouldn't have the sort of relationship to technology or to our religious life or whatever it might be, in that we are using these things to exert our will over our own lives, or exert our will over others, exert this kind of power and control. Because what we'll find in all of these things at the end of the day will not be power, will not be control, but rather it will be bondage and slavery. We become enslaved by these things. Um, again, we become enslaved by technology, or become enslaved by our passions. We become enslaved by all of these things. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. That's the real point of this video. So thanks, I guess, for asking that question, giving me the opportunity to clarify that. I'm sorry again if I didn't make that point clear in my presentation. Hopefully that's clear to you now. So if you have any questions about that or any objections to that idea, challenges, certainly feel free to ask that now. Or if anybody else has any other questions, I'll give a few more minutes before I sign off. Once again, thanks to everybody who joined us. I did enjoy, I'm looking at the kind of the back and forth that's been going on. I like to see that in the comment section and the live chat here. Appreciate all of you tuning in. Hopefully you tune in again if this is your first time. If this is your first time, I do apologize again. This is my first video after being back. I'm a little bit, I don't know, a little bit out of sorts, a little bit disorganized today. And again, I apologize for that. I hope you all enjoy this. Yeah, I'm just kind of stalling to give you a little bit of time to ask any other questions, but I don't see any other coming in. So I am going to sign off with that. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for joining me. Again, please consider checking out the links in the description. Consider supporting us at The Sacred Life. That really helps what we're doing. But it's not about doing it for money or anything like that. I don't want to be like a grifter who's doing this with that in mind. This is about about building the church, building up the faith, providing something that's valuable to you. That's our primary goal first and foremost. I do have another question that came in while I was doing all that. So Terrence the Discerner asks, what do you believe a person ought to do to live life well, not simply for material lives, but to live a life fulfilled? That's a big question, Terrence. That's a really big question. I think like that's like kind of the ultimate question in a lot of ways, and kind of the I don't know, the simple answer I would give is be an Orthodox Christian. and live faithfully according to what the church has taught, what Christ has given us. Um, and if we do that, I don't know. I know that might seem like a cheap answer to some people, but I mean, really, that is the best answer. That's why I am an unorthodox Christian. That's why I converted to Orthodoxy. It's because, like, for me, the way I look at that, the way I phrase it in my own personal journey is, I want to be a saint. I want to do what I can to truly become a saint. And you have a follow up question along with that: why Orthodox over Catholic? The simple answer for me for that, and this probably opens a big can of worms, and maybe this is a can of worms that I'll have to deal with in a later video, and maybe have somewhat in other videos already. But the simple answer is because when I look at the writings of the Christians of the first millennium, and especially of the first few centuries, I find a way of speaking and a way of living and a faith that aligns with what is taught and practiced by the Orthodox today, but does not align with what is taught by Roman Catholics today. So another way of saying that is, I think Roman Catholicism has developed and advanced and changed over the centuries, whereas Orthodoxy has not. And because I believe that the truth that is taught in the Bible and that is fulfilled in Christ is eternal, it's not something that is going to develop and change over the centuries. Um, and just, this isn't part of your question, but I'll just throw in there why that doesn't mean Protestantism or the Anabaptist culture that I came from. Was, for one thing, those things are also unstable and constantly changing, not standing on any kind of solid ground. But also because I think they also, fit that definition that I laid out already, that they're not consistent with what I find taught and practiced by the first millennium of the church, especially by the first, I don't know, 400 years, the great saints of the church. And when we look at, I don't know, I would just pose it this way: like, let's look at the first 1,000 years, and especially the first 500 years of the church, and look at the lives they lived, the sacrifices they made, the heroic martyrdom, all of these things of all of these great saints. And and for me, the question is, who is going to lead me to become that sort of person? Um, Hopefully that helps. I don't know. Hopefully that gives you something to think about. Um, I think with that, I can kind of feel my voice giving out, working out in the cold earlier today. It's cold here in Indiana. Unfortunately, I went from uh, being on the beach just a few days ago in South Florida and in the nice, warm, sunny weather to coming home to, I don't know, 6 or 7 inches of snow and cold and wind. I think my voice is kind of suffering a little bit for that. So I'm going to close up with that. Thanks again, everybody, for joining in, and especially for your great questions. Really enjoyed it tonight. I felt a little bit disorganized, but I really enjoyed the back and forth and the questions that we have had uh, going on, the conversations that we've had going on. So until next time, thanks again, and I want to wish you all peace in Christ.